Thank you, everybody, for coming. There are entire bodies of literature, training camps, pamphlets, videos, and organizations that teach people how to talk people into faith. Tonight, I'm going to teach you how to talk people out of faith. The strategy. I'll teach you how to deliver a dialectical intervention, and then I'll show you some examples of interventions that are designed specifically to separate faith from its host. I call this street epistemology. This project matters intensely. It matters because our ability to deal with problems rationally is under siege. So reason, when you think about what reason does, reason can emancipate us. Reason and public understanding of science and discourse has a possibility for people to have changed beliefs and changed moral attitudes. Many faith-based beliefs are hurting us in a broad arena in a number of ways. For example, here are some: abstinence-only sex education, prohibitions against gay marriage, bans on death with dignity, corporal punishment in schools, failure to fund international planning organizations, promoting and teaching of creationism and other pseudosciences. These are all manifestations of irrationality. These are but a few of the misguided conclusions that are wrought by wrong ways of thinking about problems. I say enough. We have a serious pressing problem, and we have to address these concerns. I was talking to Steve earlier today about global climate change and anthropogenic global warming. And we have a lot of people who think that Jesus is going to come down and rescue us from our climate problems, and thus they don't. Not only do they not do anything, they actually want to expedite our demise. I feel like gravitas in the room when I said that. Good. Well, you should. It's a horrific thing. So we need an actionable tool to deal with this. And traditionally, the way that we have dealt with this has not been as effective as it could be. So today's talk is coming from chapter 4 of my book, which is entitled A Manual for Creating Atheists. And that's exactly what it is. It is a manual to create atheists. So I'll argue that whether it's people who come to the door, Mormons, I've actually had Mormons come to my door, and Jehovah's Witnesses. I've invited them to my dinner table. I tweeted out their picture on social media. These are opportunities. They're opportunities to talk to people, to deliver dialectical interventions, to intervene in their cognitions, to help them align their beliefs with reality. All you need to do is have the right set of tools and use the right strategies and techniques to do so. So whenever it happens that if I'm at the PTA, my son's group, or what have you, or literally the Mormon missionaries do come to the door, I really do feel like I've won the lottery. I feel incredibly fortunate that I've been given an opportunity to help somebody align their beliefs with reality. So in a sense, what I'll offer you tonight is a plan for skeptical citizenship. Come on in, we have plenty of seats. Don't be shy. So it's a way to help people have certain values, and we spoke about that in our talk today. Where's the film producer? It's a way to help people have certain values and certain dispositions that lead them to reason, to lead them to valuing the right things so that their beliefs can be aligned with reality. And part of that is what their perception of the truth, and what is the truth, and what is their relationship to the truth. So here's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to give a framework, and then I'm going to give you 9 strategies. This material is dense, and it might even be a little dry, but it's essential to understand on how to conduct these conversations successfully. So I'll give you 9 strategies. The core of everything I'll say tonight is not about changing beliefs. It's about changing the way people form beliefs, hence the term epistemology. Epistemology is just a $2 word that basically means how you know what you know. Beliefs, conclusions that people have built-in defensive mechanisms. And the way to help people, this is very good if you're a young lawyer, the way to help people change those beliefs is to help them change the way they formulate their beliefs. Because beliefs have conclusions that people have have defensive mechanisms that are built in. But the way that people come to knowledge to form those beliefs almost never do. So that's what I'll show you how to target tonight. That's the main idea. The rest of this is just how to operationalize it. So this is the only big word in the whole talk tonight. That's it. $2 word, impress your friends, epistemology, how you know what you know. That's it. When you conceptualize faith as an epistemology, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Faith is a method that people use to come to knowledge. It's a method. When the faithful say that they know that Jesus walked on water, they have faith that it's true. That's in Matthew 14. Their faith leads directly to their claim of knowing. So faith claims are knowledge claims. So if someone says, for example, Jesus walked on water, they're not saying, I hope there was a person named Jesus who walked on water. They're claiming to know that Jesus walked on water. That's a knowledge claim. So the problem with that is that method of coming to knowledge is unreliable. So what it means is that it's virtually impossible to disprove a faith claim. So I'm going to give 4 quotations, and I'd ask that people sincerely reflect upon these. I won't put them on the screen too long. There's a little bit of text. These are from the most famous living Christian apologist. And some people have said he's the best Christian apologist ever. An apologist comes from 1 Peter 3:15. It basically means a defender of the faith. So rather than me give you my definition of faith, I will let William Lane, do you know who William Lane Craig is? Okay. I will let him speak for himself. You're independent of he's one of the greatest living Christian apologists. So what does he have to say about faith? And this is the way I would argue that the overwhelming majority of people use the word and think about faith. Even if there were no arguments in defense of the faith, our faith would still have its firm foundation. Okay, so let that percolate. You got it? Everybody got it? Let it percolate? Everybody's fine? Okay. God could not possibly have intended that reason should be the faculty to lead us to faith. For faith cannot hang indefinitely in suspense while reason cautiously weighs and re-weighs arguments. The scriptures teach, on the contrary, that the way to God is by means of the heart, not by means of the intellect. I hope that red flags are popping. I hope that the Sydney Atheists have been doing their jobs and people are basically freaking out right about now. Even in the face of evidence against God, which we cannot refute. Against God. That's not even belief about evidence. It's against God. We ought to believe in God on the basis of His Spirit's witness. Should a conflict arise between the witness of the Holy Spirit to the fundamental truth of the Christian faith and beliefs based on argument and evidence, then it is the former which must take precedence over the latter. I know. This is, if you like that one, you'll love this one. On at least Christian theism, the primary way in which we come to know God is not through evidence, but through the inner work of His Holy Spirit, which is effectual in bringing persons to the relation with God wholly apart from evidence. So, when I use the word faith, that's exactly what I mean. I agree with him completely. That is the definition of faith. That is how I use faith. That is how the vast majority of people in the world who are Christians use the word faith. No evidence is needed when somebody claims to know something through faith. That's why we have multiple conflicting truth claims from various traditions. For example, Muslims claim that Muhammad is the last prophet. Anybody know which surah that is? 17:1, but I'm not sure. Mormons claim that Joseph Smith, who lived after Muhammad, is a prophet. And we know that those both cannot be correct. I said that at a talk once, and someone said to me, I kid you not, they said, well, what if Muhammad had a time machine? And he tried, but that's the sort of mental gymnastics people need to do. That's the sort of bizarre rationalizing. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. We know it is just simply not possible that Muhammad is the last prophet and Joseph Smith is a prophet. That can't be true. So somebody, at least one person, is in error. So to try to fix that gap, we have to make time machines, right? Rather than saying, well, okay, so at least one person's wrong, maybe they're both wrong. But normally what happens is people don't look at faith as an epistemology. That is, they don't look at faith as a way of coming to know things. It's not looked at as an unreliable way to come to knowledge. The vast majority of people see faith in a positive light. They think if you're a person of faith, you're a good person and you're a decent person. They see it as a commitment and a moral virtue. I'm arguing that we need to begin thinking about faith as an epistemology, as a way that people come to knowledge, as a method. Once you make that conceptual shift tonight, we can help people change their beliefs by helping them change the way they come to knowledge. That's what someone means when they say they've lost their faith. It's not just that their beliefs have changed, but how they know things has changed. That's also what we mean by when someone says they're having a crisis of faith. A crisis of faith is someone being honest with themselves. They're saying to themselves, geez, does this really make sense to me? Do I really think Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse? It's interesting. Do I really think there were talking snakes? Whereas if I now were to go out into my yard and start raking up the yard and a snake said, hey, jackass, knock it off, you would be freaking out, right? You would be. So a crisis of faith is the moment of honesty that people have with themselves. So street epistemology, what I'll talk about tonight, it's a transition from talking about God and religion to talking about epistemology. That is, I'm going to give you a method to talk to people about how they know things, particularly in the arena of faith, and then I'll show you some examples. So nothing I'll say tonight targets conclusions. So a conclusion is, for example, Jesus rose from the tomb. They don't target conclusions. Like Jesus being born a virgin is another one. Or they don't target moral issues, like the Catholic prohibition on birth control. And they don't target community. They don't target mosques, temples, and synagogues. Instead, they target how people know what they think they know. That's the basis of this whole thing. How do people come to knowledge? Remember, there's no defensive or virtually no defensive mechanisms that we've evolutionarily adapted for defending a way that we come to knowledge. Only a conclusion that we have about the world. Once we do that, we're in the realm of reason and evidence. And that's where we want to be. We want to be at the adult table. And we want to bring the people with whom we're speaking to the adult table. We want to have a conversation with them and treat them as rational adults so that we can adjudicate problems and figure out the best course of action. So if people can't do this, then we need to be blunt, but be kind, and we need to very politely tell them that they have to go to the children's table, the kids' table, because this is a conversation for adults. We're talking about public policy, we're talking about things that matter, and the way that we formulate those beliefs, or the way that we should, is on the basis of reason and evidence. And I'd like to ask you to participate with me in the adult table to have a conversation where we bring our evidence together. So, I'll now lay out 9 strategies that you can immediately use tonight to begin talking people out of faith and superstition and into reason. The first 2 of these strategies, is anybody else hot in here or is it just me? It's like really hot. I'm burning up in here. Take off my jacket. My jacket. This thing I know. So I've used these with these techniques with disaffected populations in the prisons. So I'll run through these, and then give you examples. Strategies 1 and 2 focus on changing the behavior of people who are not interested in having their behavior changed. This is grounded in the peer-reviewed literature on how to reach people who are unmotivated and disaffected. So, I've drawn upon this literature and I've basically translated it, so here it is. Number 1, meet people where they are. This is a term that comes from motivational interviewing, and it's a technique which draws from the literature on behavior change and how to change people's behavior. It deals with something called the trans-theoretical model. So this was a real eye-opener for me when I figured this out. So people who are alcoholics sometime, maybe even depending on the target population, spontaneously remit from drinking. Just boom, we have no idea why. I read about this literature. My wife is a professor of medicine, addiction medicine doctor, and I go to these conferences and I listen to this. I find it fascinating. But that doesn't happen with people of faith. The release from faith and the escape from faith is not something that happens instantly, or very rarely it happens instantly. It happens slowly. So that people go through these stages of change, these behavioral changes. I think I will take off my jacket. I am burning up.
Oh, your mic.
I knew something was going to go wrong. Thank you. Free admission to whoever whistled. All right, let's try this again. No?
Other side.
All right.
You're down under now.
Good. No free admission for you then. Hello, Sydney. How's that? Is that right? All right. So the people go through these stages of change. So here are the stages of change, and then I'll show you, I'll teach you how to target each one. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. So this is the translation of those. Not ready to change, getting ready to change, and ready to change. So I understand that we don't want to say that people are in denial, because when they're in denial, it seems like it sounds permanent and unhelpable. So that they're not, the faithful aren't in denial, they're just pre-contemplatives. It's just a much nicer word. They're not yet thinking about abandoning their faith because they haven't met us yet. They haven't learned the dialectical strategies for this. The goal is to meet people where they are on the trans-theoretical model and walk step by step by step, taking them, and I'll give you examples if this is abstract. I know that this material is dense. But you want to meet them where they are, find their stage, and the goal is to move them one stage. That's it. One stage in the first intervention, and then later on, we bring them all the way up. So, in a sense, this is a very hopeful project. The faithful, that's great. The faithful are not hopeless cases, they're pre-hope cases. So, the second one is very important. I heard an incredibly moving, thank you for that. I heard an incredibly moving story tonight from a fellow who's here can I share a little bit of your story or no? Is that okay? All right. And my new friend here who was a Muslim who managed to escape Islam, and when he was in high school, did you call it high school? Yeah. When he was in high school, he wanted to go to the prom. His parents would not let him go to the prom. And his best friend, who was not a Muslim, called his parents on the phone and spoke passionately about why he should be able to go to the prom. A very lovely, loving story, but that idea of not only not creating adversarial relationships, but of actually bending over and being kind and being compassionate and being considerate, that's the way that we help people. It's not shouting, it's not fear-mongering, it's not playing into the angry atheist narrative, which the theists have constructed very, very well. The literature on education and behavioral change is crystal clear. People will change their pathological beliefs from a point of view of safety. So we have to set the tone for that safe environment. the tone is never a tone of attack, and it's never a tone of aggression. We want people to feel like it's a safe space where they can have an honest, sincere conversation with somebody and no questions are off the table. So we're creating a public space, a conversational space. It's a place on the street where we're trying to be real with somebody. It's the adult table. So there are certain words that you can use that will help facilitate behavioral change in people. I'll give you one from a study a while ago. Someone did a fascinating study on cutting in line in supermarkets, and they wanted to figure out what was the most effective way to be able to cut in front of someone in a queue in a supermarket. And they found that it was the addition of one word that dramatically increased the percentage of times, the likelihood that someone would let them cut in the line. And that word was, no, not please or thank you. The magic words didn't work there. Because. It doesn't matter what comes after the because. It was the because. So we know from the literature, there's an exhaustive literature on words and the words we use and how we use those words and how those affect other people. Frank Luntz has done some great stuff on switching the narrative from anthropogenic global warming to climate change, something that American Republicans picked up on. And we know this. We know how to study it. It's subject to the tools of science. We can do this. So I use, these are some key words to use. Mutual, reciprocal, we. How can we figure this out? You're a team. You're a we. One. In other words, not you. I'm not placing someone in a defensive posture. One. I try to avoid, it's tricky, but I try to avoid the word no. N-O. Cannot, won't, I, me. And I don't parallel talk. I'll talk about parallel talking in a minute. We is a team. People are less likely to use a defensive posture if they're not under attack and if you're trying to solve a problem together. And again, this goes a tremendous way into trying to solve that angry atheist narrative. That atheists are somehow angry without God or we're upset about something. It's just not true. I mean, people are upset because they've been treated egregiously by people of faith if they're gay and they can't get married or what have you. But people will not change their beliefs if you're yelling at them. It is not conducive to facilitate belief change. I go to churches and temples and mosques frequently. I perform interventions. I talk to people constantly. And when you go to these places, people are very nice to you. And they're very nice to you because they want you to partake in their delusions. So the way, it's true. If every time you walked into a church, someone said, "Get out of here, you bastard," you would not walk in that church again. It just wouldn't happen. So how do you create those climates, those non-adversarial, non-angry climates, those relationships that you can foster? So there's an interesting line of literature called, and extremely disturbing, called relationship evangelism. So I took a look at that, and I saw what they did. For example, Mormons have a really good trick. So one of the ways that a Mormon will get in your house, I can't do this here, so I don't want to walk off the thing, but they'll put out their hand to shake, and once you put out your hand, they'll walk through the doorstep. That's a way that they get in. So people have studied these techniques for years, and I'm going to give you some of them over the course of the presentation. This is one of the things that I do that's very helpful. I reconceptualize the problem of faith as a virus. I actually do believe that the faithful are not well, and they need help. I actually do believe that. And they have somehow caught something, and Dawkins talks about this as a mimetic transfer, a transfer of almost like ideas and beliefs, and it epidemiologically replicates almost identical to the way that a virus would replicate. I believe that people who have caught this are epistemic victims. They're victims of certain knowledge claims, and they're taught that having faith is a good thing and that it makes you a good person. It's incredibly difficult to foster certain values like belief revision. like self-honesty, like doubt. If you believe that questioning some aspect of your faith is going to make you a bad person. So, just in the same way is that I'm not upset with somebody who has caught a cold. I am not upset with someone who's caught the faith virus. I'm not. I deal with these people very civilly, and I listen to what they have to say, but I'm certainly not mad with them. I'm not upset with them, and I would hope that you would deal with them in a very civil way as well. It really is a type of epistemological civility. We need to be more compassionate and more understanding when we move people through the trans-theoretical model, when we move people from stage to stage to stage. And again, that relates back to the idea of not creating adversarial relationships with people. Okay, so 4, 5, and 6 are suggested prohibitions. Here we go. God is a conclusion. It's the conclusion someone has as a result of an unreliable epistemology. That is, as an unreliable way to come to knowledge. So we don't want to talk about God because that's addressing the symptom. It's not addressing the underlying pathology. God is the conclusion. The other thing is, again, once you talk about conclusions, conclusions have defensive mechanisms. How do you know that there's a God is much less likely to have a defensive mechanism. So that also means that you want to avoid debate. It's not about winning. It's about helping somebody revise their beliefs. It's much easier to help someone abandon their faith than it is to separate them from their religion. The whole system revolves around targeting faith, which is how people know what they think they know. Religion is bingo, it's songs, it's community, it's, pastries or whatever. I don't know what it is anymore, but all of these are pretty good things. I mean, I like barbecues. We have barbecues at our house. So it's not a question of attacking communal structures. It's a question of faith. And we need to move from one conception of faith and God, one conception of God and back. Your intervention should never target faith or religion or community or friendship. Also, if we can undermine faith, then you can undermine all religions simultaneously. I actually do have a Quran tutor, but you don't need to study the intimate details of the Quran or the intimate details of the Bible to have a conversation with somebody. All you need to know is to figure out how they know what they're claiming to know. It is literally that simple. Faith is the foundation. If you take it away, everything that's built upon it will collapse, or at the very least, is severely compromised. Okay, number 6, don't talk about politics. It's a mistake. Bringing up politics in the discussion sidetracks it. Don't talk about ISIS, don't talk about Iran, don't talk about any of that stuff, about Israel. If you talk about those things, many people who have abandoned faith or escaped from faith, if you talk about those things, many people perceive that as an attack on them by proxy, and you're some kind of liberal. I don't know if liberal is the right word in Australia, but you're some kind of like left-winger, although the right wing has their own particular delusions as well. So all of those things contaminate the intervention. Okay, so this is a really difficult one to talk about, because usually when I give these talks, I have, in general, if I were to guess, people are really smart on average. You're here because you're interested and you're thoughtful and you're somewhat reflective. So when I tell people this is probably the one thing that you will not listen to tonight. And as many times as I've tried this, people still don't listen to me. Do not talk about facts with people. It just won't work. People do not dig themselves into these cognitive sinkholes because they believe on the basis of facts and evidence. They talk themselves into these things because they don't. Think about the gift that your people have given my people. Ken Ham, right? The Australian creationist. There is no amount of evidence that you can, there are no facts, there's no data point, there's no data set that you can give Ken Ham. He says, oh, well, I thought the Earth was 1,000 years old. It's all arbitrary anyway. It doesn't matter how many thousands of years. But now I realize that the universe is actually closer to 14 billion. I've looked at the evidence and no, it's not going to work. It's an ineffective strategy. There's also something called the backfire effect. The backfire effect is fascinating. We know that if people are given data that conflict the beliefs they have, they're more likely to hunker down with those beliefs. Remember that. That's gold as a lawyer. Okay, I'm talking to my new friend here who's a lawyer. Okay, so facts will not help you to achieve what you want to achieve with somebody in the earlier stages of the intervention. The further one is down on the trans-theoretical model, the more you can move facts in. So when someone, for example, is in the action stage, they're ready to change their faith, they're ready, then you can start bringing in facts. Pre-contemplatives, no facts whatsoever. But again, here's the problem that most people sitting here are going to have. Well, I formulate my beliefs on the basis of evidence. If I only gave them one piece of evidence, they'd somehow change their beliefs. But that's not how most people formulate their beliefs. They don't do that. So your bringing facts into the discussion is going to worsen someone's epistemic situation because it's going to cause them to hunker down. Remember, the problem with this whole thing is with epistemologies people use and not conclusions that they hold. So you're targeting the way they come to knowledge. Okay, so this is compounded by the fact that in the culture that we have today, we in the West, everybody thinks they're entitled to their own facts. You are not entitled to your own facts. You are entitled to your own opinion about matters of taste. Like, what do you like? I had a Caesar salad tonight with no croutons because I'm on a low-carb diet. I like croutons. That's a matter of taste, not a matter of fact. The distance between the sun and the moon, so how, paper burns at 451 Fahrenheit, who does whatever that translates into, that's a matter of fact. That's not a matter of taste. I have these all the time with alternative medicines. People will say to me like, well, my aunt, I teach science and pseudoscience in Portland State. Oh, my aunt put a cat on her head, and when she put her cat on her head, her arthritis or whatever went away, her eczema. Really? So once people make those claims, you can then turn the tools of science on those claims to make an evaluation of them. But remember, people don't formulate their beliefs on the basis of evidence, particularly in the pre-contemplative stage. So lighten up on it. All right. Focus on epistemology and don't let yourself become sidetracked. But I have a prediction for you. If you followed the plan, you should be able to do this in 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all it takes to move somebody one notch in the trans-theoretical model, sometimes 10. It's true. I'll show you actual examples later on. The discussion will go from my belief is true to I'm comfortable with it. That is the necessary. Once you see that in a conversation, you have to identify that immediately, and you know that you've made substantive progress. When people start off the discussion with my faith is true, and in 5 to 7 minutes later, and it won't be a clear demarcation. It won't be like something that says, well, you know what? I realized 5 minutes ago my faith was true, but I realize it's not true anymore. But you know what? I like to play bingo, and it feels good, and I want to love baby Jesus. No, that is never the case. What is the case is there's no clear demarcation. Nobody will say, well, I thought my faith was true. Now I realize it's not. So it's called the benefits argument. You need to be wary when someone moves from my faith is true to my faith is beneficial. You can have that conversation, by the way, only after they've explicitly acknowledged that their faith isn't true. Here's a biggie. Divorce belief from morality. People believe that having faith makes them a better person. That's an extremely potent combination to make a belief difficult to dislodge. The moment you think, Dan Dennett calls that belief in Chapter 8 of Breaking the Spell. The moment that you believe that holding a particular belief makes you a better person, you're far less likely to revise that belief. So that's particularly important in the preparation stage of change in the trans-theoretical model. So people will want to make those changes, but they're afraid of the implications. What's going to happen if I abandon God? What's going to happen if I abandon belief? Am I going to give into homosexual urges? Am I going to start stealing and doing things? But it's funny, but that's what a lot of people think. They think that somehow atheism is an excuse for homosexuality. Anybody who would think that, by the way, has those tendencies themselves, because nobody who's an atheist ever would think that. So you have to divorce faith and belief from morality. And again, look at it and think at it is how you know what you know. So the problem is that many people who've caught the faith virus are actually grateful for their affliction. And I think that makes it difficult. I was talking to Steve about this. I think that makes it difficult for what I do. You know, if you're a doctor and you heal somebody, everybody's grateful. But if you're delusional and someone's trying to help you out of that delusion to align your beliefs with reality, instead of saying, hey, thanks, they get upset with you. I mean, it's very frustrating, right? And you write a blog that you were telling me you were a Christian for a while, and you've had those experiences. It's very frustrating when you do this. But if you do it concisely in the right way, you find that it's an incredibly rewarding thing. People will come up to you afterwards, sometimes years afterwards, and thank you, say, oh, you know. And that's particularly true if you're civil when you do it, and you're compassionate when you do it, and you genuinely listen to what people have to say. So, here's the key to that, is that faith doesn't make you a better person. My lack of faith in Jesus or Apollo or Steve's lack of faith in ISIS, it doesn't make me a good or a bad person. It's just an unreliable epistemology. It's just an unreliable way to come to knowledge. That's the key shift. That's one of the main deliverables and take-homes that I'd like everybody to think about tonight. Once you make that shift and once you speak to somebody in that way, then you're in the world of evidence and argument. Then you're at the adult table. Then you can have a rational conversation with somebody where you can bring pieces of evidence. And adults have rational disagreements. I'm sure if we probe long enough, Steve and I think, have a disagreement about gun control in the United States. I think there are far too many guns at this point to do anything about it. But the idea is that you can have a rational conversation in which you do not target conclusions. You talk about how people hold those beliefs. Okay, those were the 9 strategies that you can use briefly to do your own epistemological interventions. I want to review those very quickly. Meet people where they are. Develop non-adversarial relationships. Reconceptualize faith as a virus. Make that move. Target faith and not God. Target faith and not religion. Target faith and never mention politics. Avoid facts, which I said, I don't think many people are keen on this, but you have to trust me in the pre-theoretical, you can read about this in my book. There are specific examples of interventions. This is borne out by the data. There's a massive corpus of literature on this. Do not bring facts into the discussion. It will only cause someone to hunker down. Bring the focus back very gently on how people know what they claim to know. If they make a shift in your conversation to my faith is beneficial, all you need to do is say to them, wow, we were having a really interesting conversation about faith and truth, and you started telling me how it's benefiting you. That's great. I'm happy to have that conversation. But let's go back and talk about whether or not your faith is true. I found that to be a really interesting conversation. Could we please talk about that? Notice how I frame that in terms of a question. If you frame something in terms of an order, please talk about that. The defensive posture goes up. So if you say, can we please, it's like sometimes people say, I invite you to do something. So it's giving people a choice where they can say no. And one thing that I found from doing this for decades is that people love to talk about their faith. People of faith, they could not possibly think of it. And maybe soccer or football or something they'd like to talk about. People love to talk about that. So engage them in those conversations. Finally, the last thing I gave was the divorcing of belief from morality. You have to uncouple the idea that if somebody holds a belief, it makes them a better person. There are various ways to do this. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you want. All right. Those are 9 strategies. I want to walk you briefly, show you some quick videos. I'm going to walk you through some interventions. So if you haven't seen it, who's seen Anthony Magnabosco's YouTube channel? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So he took the techniques from my book. He uses a timer. I suggest that when you first start doing this, you should never take more than 10 minutes. If you're taking more than 10 minutes, you're doing something wrong. All of my interventions are 5 to 10 minutes. He records these, and I give you my word that nobody in these videos are actors. There's no stooges. Nobody's been paid anything to do these. These are real people found on the streets. Here's what I do at the beginning of every single conversation. It's very important that you keep your own delusions in check. So the way that you do that is, here's the structure of an intervention. 2 minutes of the intervention, between 90 seconds and 120 seconds of that intervention, should be spent building rapport. And there's a whole science on that of actually how to build rapport with someone. Here's the bottom line. Only ask questions of people if you're genuinely curious about those questions. Where's my man? Don't ask anything if you're not interested. You have to be sincere. If you are not sincere with people, this will not work. It just won't work. So you build rapport. You ask people questions you want to know. You never parallel talk. Here's what parallel talk is. I say, hey, how's it going? He says, good. He was talking. Where you from? He says, well, I'm from, Perth. And I say, oh, Perth, that's cool. I'm going to Perth. Actually, I am. But I just turned the conversation from him talking about Perth to my experience about Perth. It's not about you. What do they do with you? It's about you helping someone live a life free of delusion. So why are you talking about your experience in Perth? It doesn't make any sense. So you're trying to ask somebody questions that you sincerely want to learn about. You ask them questions, you get feedback from them, and then you immediately begin on the intervention in about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Your first order of business is build rapport. What's your second order of business? Your second order of business is to keep your own delusions in check. You might think that you're really good at doing this or what have you, but you need some way to figure out how much you've helped people. You need to be able to quantify that. You need to repeat what works, and you need to discard what doesn't. So I often ask people, you got that from some videos I sent in, I often ask people a simple question. I build rapport. I know the man's from Perth. I don't know. I've never seen the guy before. Where are you from? Sydney. Okay, see? There you go. Don't trust your own delusions. And then you ask somebody a question like, well, how confident are you in that? You find a belief to target. Usually the lower on the floor of the house, like if you looked at it like an architectonic structure, like it's a big house, you want to target the support beam. You don't want to be chopping down the attic. It doesn't do you any good because they'll just rebuild the attic. You got to go down. You got to level the whole house by going at the foundation. Usually the foundation in Christianity is the resurrection narrative. Okay, well, how confident are you in that? Well, if they say, and then you give them the scale. 0 is I'm not confident at all. 5 is medium confident. 7 is fairly confident. 10 is absolutely positive. I cannot be mistaken. Well, like those. Or you could do it 1 in 100 if you want a more nuanced version. And so then you deliver the intervention, and then you ask them the exact question. At the end of the intervention, you see what they say. Well, how confident are you in that belief? And if they say anything less than what they were, you know what you did worked. If they said anything more, that's not good. You screwed that up. So that's one strategy to do that is to give a pre-test, the intervention, and then a post-test. So all of these interventions, and I can guide you through we could do a role play with someone who was a Christian. We do any of this stuff, I can show you. It's not a Jedi mind trick. It's not magic. It's drawn directly from the literature. Here's what you need to do. You need to stick to the plan. Don't do anything crazy. Don't stray it initially. When you first start practicing this, when you first start using this, stick to the plan. Just there's a template in the book of exactly how to do this. And then later on, you can add, like if you're funny, you've got a good sense of humor, what have you, you can add that. If you've escaped from a religion, you can talk to people about that if you find that they're a similar religion to you. So I try to do this. I look at these conversations as opportunities. And one of the things I do is I sit in the planes in the middle seat, and it doubles the likelihood. People love to read Bibles on the planes, and they sat next to the right man. So I'm happy to have those conversations with people. So all of these little interactions are opportunities for you to help other people. It's also important not just that you're sincere. But here's the indispensable piece of this. This will not work if you are not willing to reconsider your beliefs. The only way this works, you can do all the techniques in the world, but if you're insincere or if you're not willing to reconsider what you believe, if someone presents you with evidence and arguments and reason for Muhammad flying to heaven on a winged horse, it is incumbent upon you to believe that. This only works if you model the dispositions that you would like to see in the faithful. Civility, open-mindedness, a willingness to reconsider, valuing truth, valuing evidence. The willingness to reconsider is, in my opinion, that and a trustfulness of reason are the linchpin beliefs behind this whole mechanism. And if you're not willing to reconsider if someone has a better argument than you, or at least to think about it, this isn't going to work. Carl Sagan said it best. Who knows Carl Sagan's famous popularized quotation? The greater the extraordinary claims require extraordinary errors. So if somebody, I am completely willing to be a Muslim or a Hindu or a Sikh or a Buddhist, provided that there's sufficient evidence for that. But I'll need more evidence. Listen, here's the other thing though. We know that in a very short time, change is possible. We saw that with the gay rights movement. Richard Dawkins is one of the things he wants to do is he's advocating the openly secular campaign, where he wants people who we want to normalize what it means to be a person who does not have an unreliable epistemology, that is, an atheist. And little snippets, little videos on YouTube. You know, I'm from Perth. I'm a carpenter. Even little snippets like that to just know that you exactly the page out of the gay rights movement. We're your neighbors, we're your friends, and we're here. If we help people often say, well, I'm going to take away people's hope. No, that's not the definition of hope. You can't hope to have a round square. The only way that you can have hope is if the thing that you're hoping for has the possibility of manifesting. If you want to live a better life, and if you want to help other people lead a better life, the only way that you can do that is through reason and rationality. There's no other way. You don't make Intel chips by sacrificing goats on the hoods of cars. It just doesn't work. It's not efficacious. It will not lead people to the truth. The only way to do that is through reason and rationality, and we have to embody those characteristics as well. Every single person is capable of living a life free of delusion. We know, I personally know, my friends who have become atheists who were former ministers. John W. Locke, we were just talking about him. He's become Jerry DeWitt, Dan Barker. The list is virtually endless. Street epistemology, this program, has been designed to facilitate that hope in people. If people think that if your starting belief is wrong, then your epistemology will be populated by beliefs that will almost certainly not lead you to your well-being. If your starting point is that someone rose from a tomb after he's been dead, then almost invariably you will take steps in your life to create conditions external to yourself that you think is bringing about your flourishing, but is not. People often ask, well, will there be another horseman? What happens? Christopher Hitchens is dead. What are we going to do? I don't think that's a good way to think about it. I think a better way to think about it is we now have tools to move the discourse forward. We now know that there are ways to interact with people in a very civil, very respectful manner in only 5 to 10 minutes to help them be more reflective about what it is that they believe, to help them be more honest with themselves so that they can realign their beliefs with reality. Every single person is capable of living a life free of delusion. You can help them facilitate that. Thank you. Thanks. Boy, I was burning up there. I was like starting to fade out. I was burning out. So thank you for your patience.
And it burnt up so well that it blew the heaters, and now it's all cool.
Worked out great. So let's go over questions. Anybody has any questions? There's nothing off the table. It's totally wide open. And
So if you're interested, if you'd like to ask a question, if you wouldn't mind standing in the queue here.
It's all uphill after time machines.
Tony.
Peter, I'm going to ask you a question that's a little bit complex, and I apologise, but it relates to my experience with family members that are exquisitely fundamentalist to the point of being your own household terrorist. And the reason I say that is because it's not that you can even get past first base. They're right, God's on their side, and you can't argue. And it explodes in certain situations, in family situations, where they feel that they have the moral right. How do you deal with that sort of, what I call the religious terrorist? Not in a violent way, but in a verbal way.
I think just like anything else, Stephen Covey, which is ironic because he's a Mormon, in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, say you have to begin with your end in mind. So what's your objective? Can you give him the mic for a second? Yeah, so what's your objective?
The objective, it's actually difficult. It's not to deconvert.
Yeah.
It is to have a rational discussion over something that involves a family matter. And you cannot do it. And so I suppose my question would therefore come down to, how do you deal with people who are completely irrational? Because I find a lot of these people are exceedingly self-centered.
Yeah.
They have their own mind, decision in their mind. They don't want change.
Yeah.
They want to force it on everyone else. Aside from walking away from the table, is there some sort of method of rationalising with people?
Of reasoning with people?
Like that?
I'll tell you some things that I use, and I'm always mixing this up and trying to figure out what works. And the way that I figure out what works, as I told people before, is you give them a pre-test, you give them the intervention, you give them the post-test, and if the more it moves them, the more effective it is. So I've shifted my thinking to a number of things. One thing is the briefer the better. Short, mini micro-interventions are good. The other thing is, in addition to all the principles that I talked about today, to keeping your composure, calm, cool, collected, you really have to, if somebody is that far down the rabbit hole, if somebody is literally that far gone, you just have to you have to custom tailor an approach. Let me tell you something that I do that I think works, that I like. John W. Loftus wrote a great book called The Outsider Test for Faith. And basically you use the same tools to analyze other faiths, turn those tools on your own faith. So you start off with the assumptions. We can figure out, how can one figure out if their faith is true? We can figure out if faith is true. And the same tools that the Pentecostal uses to examine the Baptists or the Muslims or what have you, let's turn those tools of reason and rationality on our own faith. There are ways that this emancipatory project of street epistemology will not work. It won't work if nobody says anything to you, because you have nothing to hook on to. You can't figure out how someone knows what they know if you ask them a question and they don't tell you anything. Right? There are other ways. There are other things that you can do, and check out my talk on this. It's the Easter Bunny, Jesus, the Easter Bunny, and Other Delusions. Just say no. I talk about that, how to give that structured method of people to think about things. But it is admittedly true that there are some cases that are people that are so recalcitrant. In that sense, I wouldn't look at it in terms of helping them. I would just look at it in terms of keeping the peace. What can we do to move the family forward? And maybe you have a temporary moratorium on it, but the more it's even incumbent upon you more to be calm and dispassionate and compassionate. It's not an excellent answer, but it's an honest one. It's the best one I have.
Thank you.
Just those people that are going to ask a question, if I could please ask you to rest the piece against your chin, and then we'll just get the right sound. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd just like to ask, I've debated people who don't claim that they know their stuff on faith, like creationists. they claim they've got all the scientific evidence for their belief. They don't, faith doesn't come into it at all. And so people who believe crop circles are made by aliens, they think there's proper evidence for it. So don't you have to bring in facts there?
No.
To try and
no,
change
never. What you use there is a version of Matt McCormick's diffeasibility test. So what you'll do is, in that case, you'd say to someone the following case. So I'll construct this for everybody. The first thing you say is, oh, well, that's interesting. What piece of evidence, even hypothetically, could someone present to you that would make you change your mind? Now, here's the key. If they say to you, no piece of evidence, then they don't formulate their beliefs on the basis of evidence. Because formulating your beliefs on the basis of evidence means, by definition, that there's some evidence that you could have that would lead you to a different outcome. That's what it means to formulate your beliefs on the basis of evidence. Now, if they say to you, there is no evidence, they say, okay, well, maybe we can have a more honest conversation. And that conversation is, I do not formulate my beliefs on the basis of evidence. I believe this because it makes me feel good. So you still don't have to hit them with facts. You hit them with the diffeasibility test. It's a wonderful, wonderful test. Now, let's say that they say to you, well, the evidence that you could provide me with is this. And then you say, X, whatever the evidence is. And you say, okay, let me just be crystal clear about this. Just for my own edification. You notice how I shifted that on myself? Let me just be crystal clear. So if I hypothetically were to provide you with this piece of evidence, would you change your mind? Yes, I would. Okay. I don't mean to be repetitive. I'm so sorry. I just really am trying to figure this out. So if I were to provide you with this piece of evidence, you would change your mind. Now, in the case of young earth creationism, you'll never find that. Never. People won't say that. But let's say it's 1 in a million and someone does. You reiterate it 3 or 4 times. What would that evidence look like to you? So you know exactly what you need. And then you go find it. But you don't have to worry, you'll never be in that situation. Look, that's the whole idea when someone has an argument for the existence of God. You don't even need to know anything about arguments for the existence of God. Nothing. Zero. You don't even have to know kalam, nothing. All you need to know is the following. Someone gives you an argument for the existence of God. Here's exactly what you say to them. Let's say it's a diffeasibility test. Let's say hypothetically I could provide you with a reason that that's not true. Would you still believe in God? If they say yes, then you say to them, well, then you don't believe on the basis of that argument. You believe on so let's talk about why you really believe. If they say no, you say great, and then you take a look at the argument. It's just Matt McCormick's diffeasibility test. It's fantastic. It cuts through the BS instantly. No facts needed. Hi. Oh, you're from Oregon.
Yeah. I was wondering, is there a way to ever have like a proper conversation with someone on the internet? Because so far, I posted something a while ago, just pointing out why we probably weren't created. The appendix, wisdom teeth, teeth bunching, all that. And so far, my responses have ranged from people trying to prove me wrong, and then I give them something counter. They say I'm going to hell, or they hate me, or I'm a heretic and a baby eater, or just blocking me and calling me a pleb. Is there any way for us to... Yeah.
Can I use that, a pleb?
Is there any way to actually have a real discussion with someone on the internet?
You have a great accent.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is. And the same fellow, Anthony Magnabosco, who had the YouTube channel, am I echoing? The same fellow, Anthony Magnabosco, on the YouTube channel does online interventions, and people have done online interventions as well. I don't particularly do those. I don't know. I'm an evidence guy, and I don't know that the peer-reviewed literature. I know that this stuff works 101. I would love to tell you that there's a way, but that would be my own speculation, and it wouldn't be rooted in the evidence. I would hope there's a way, but I don't actually know it. I would think that I could make a reasonable inference that some of these techniques may work, but I'll tell you what. Now, here's a diffeasibility test applied to myself. Here's how I could be wrong about that belief. One of the reasons that this is so successful is that people don't have an opportunity to go back into their communities to ask their preacher to then be reinforced in their delusions. So it's on the spot. So that's the other thing. If you do this, post these to YouTube, go to the Street Epistemology group, and the thing that I'm working with now is what should be the timing of the second intervention. And I'm almost positive that the second intervention should become before they go back to their religious community and people start telling them to pray about it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll interrupt myself and say parenthetically, here's the problem with asking someone to pray about it. When you say, well, just pray about this, you're basically asking them to put their belief first. If you went to your pastor and said, well, you said, I'm having a crisis of faith, so just pray about it. It would be much more honest if you said, well, why don't you pray to Zeus about it? Why don't you pray to Poseidon about it? But when you pray to the God that you're having questions about in the first place, it's a type of confirmation bias. You're placing your belief first. So I don't know if it works online. Some people think it does. I'm not going to pretend to know something I don't know. I don't. Sorry, I can't be more definitive. It's just an honest answer.
Thank you.
Hi.
Very fun. I learned a lot. I belong in the camp of people that believe that we are born, in a way, right-wing, left-wing, religious, non-religious, and the ones that convert, they basically just need a little bit of courage and push, but they're already there. And I have a biological background. I am around people talk about genetics, epigenetics, neurobiology, and I just don't know whether deconverting and not giving people who are born to believe in some sort of delusion and cult, whatever it can be, it's going to work. So I have a feeling we might want to replace that with something for these people.
So I'm not sure I know. What's the question?
I'm just saying I'm not sure if this is going to work for half the society, really, because I think religion has existed in society, human society, because we're selected for it. A lot of us have been throughout.
But if that were true, people wouldn't abandon their faith, and there would be no word apostasy. It's so common that there's a word for it. It's called apostasy.
Yes.
But I will tell you,
I'm not. I don't have 100% proof, because if it's genetics, it would be very, very, very complex. It wouldn't be one gene. It wouldn't be even.
Yeah.
It could be epigenetics, environment. It's just very complicated. Richard Dawkins will understand what I'm saying, but.
Okay. No, that's right. I'm not a geneticist. I will say that sometimes I've been working on for about 8 years. I've known her for 8 years. Many interventions, and I haven't been able to budget. Either that or her verbal behavior doesn't comport with what she actually believes. So it would be a lie if I stood up here and I said, you're going to do this, and the next thing you know, everybody's going to be secular, and we're going to be getting along, and no one's going to believe in talking snakes, and everyone's going to be happy. No. There are some people for whom these techniques, or they're just very recalcitrant. I'll give you a great example of a group. I have an incredibly low, way not to market your book, but it's true. I have an incredibly low success rate with Jehovah's Witnesses. I have an idea of why that might be, but I'm not sure. There's something about the faith virus that with people who have been infected by that particular strain, there's something, I don't know what it is, but it's almost like they're extraordinarily recalcitrant. So with some people it's more difficult than with other people.
I'm wondering if we need a cult of some sort that would be very rainbowy, very, very peaceful. Something that is peaceful and it's still not true, but they can actually move on with it and be happy, and then we're all in peace. Because I just think a lot of people need faith.
I don't think anybody needs to live. Look, if someone tells you that they're better off with a delusion than not, no adult should have to have a delusion to find meaning in their lives. They just shouldn't.
I had this argument with my mom, and I told her, I said, a lot of times I say, blah, blah, prophet, you're doing this praying once in a while. She's not religious, really.
Yeah.
I said, he was a child molester, and I keep saying, this was in blah, blah. I give her examples, and she actually stopped me once, and she said,
I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I just don't want to know. I'm happy. I'm 67. Leave me alone. I don't want to know more.
Right, which is a different from your initial question, but right. Good, thank you.
I'm wondering.
You're wondering.
Some people just cannot let go because of age or genetics. What do we do?
I don't know if that's true. I think some people have a more difficult time of letting go. But when I spoke in Calgary, Canada, to Nate Phelps's group, and he was the son of the Westboro Baptist Church, and they're a whole new level of crazy. And he was able to escape. And seriously, if he can escape, anybody can escape.
Tina, just as a matter of information, we just put something on our Facebook site, and it was something along the lines of 20 million or 19 million Americans. Do you remember the fact I gave you this morning? I think 19 million Americans have escaped religion in the last 9 or 10 years.
Oh, yeah, so that's the other thing. The percentage of nuns has gone up dramatically, and even gone up. Look, I said it before I talked, but we know that change is possible in very short periods of time. And that the shift in attitudes about homosexuality is a paradigmatic example of that. You wouldn't almost find anybody. I can remember when I was growing up, you usually didn't see black and white couples or mixed race couples, and now you're seeing all the time. No one thinks anything. Now you see guys. I don't know about Sydney. Only been here for 3 days or so, but you see guys walking down these. Where's my Oregon friend? Raise your hand. Where are you? Yeah, you see people walking down the street in Portland with men and women. Nobody thinks anything about it. You know, maybe admittedly it's not Texas, but there have been a shift in attitudes, a very radical shift in attitudes in a very short period of time.
First of all, thanks for a really wonderful talk. I appreciate that. I was a Christian until about 5 years ago, and I just want to encourage the lady who asked 2 questions ago, that was largely due to interactions on the internet. So it's possible for that to help. And I've got feedback from people who've seen my various rantings and arguments, saying that that led them to go and think about it themselves. So I would encourage you to apply these sort of techniques in the virtual world. I almost didn't ask my question, but then you said anything goes. So this is possibly a little bit tangential, but I was interested in the way that you use the word know, K-N-O-W, when you talk about Christians that know that Jesus walked in the water, for example. Yeah. So what do you mean when you say that someone knows something? Is it just a strong belief, or does the thing have to be true to say that they really know it? Or how you know that?
Oh, wow, that's a huge question. So I'm going to try to give you the rough outline version of that. There's a difference between to know something and to believe something. And many people, particularly people of faith, conflate the two. They think that if they believe something, they know something. Now, I know someone sitting there and they're like, oh, it's hard. This is like some semantic game. No, it's actually not a semantic game. And the words that we use are very important because they can trap us in a way of life. So let me give you an example. Here's my new friend, Steve. Let's say that Steve said to me, Steve texts me, and he says, I'm just going to try to do an Australian accent I could do. Oh my gosh, Peter.
That's
somebody has stolen your laptop. And, I say, oh, this is terrible, it's terrible, I gotta do something about it. And I run up here, and he says, punked, just kidding, there it is right there. I believed that he stole my laptop, but I didn't know that he stole my laptop. So to know something, Plato's in the Theaetetus gives three things. You need to believe it. That's kind of a given, so we don't worry about that. It needs to be justified. So in other words, you need to have a good reason for believing it. And it needs to be true. So unless it's true, you can't be said to know something. And the key there is to tease out the words belief and knowledge. And if you really wanted to get deeper into the question, which is a whole other talk, hope, faith, and trust. Those are words that we need to disambiguate those words. I mean, those words are so problematic because people use them interchangeably, and they're simply not interchangeable. I mean, if someone says, look, think about it this way. If someone says, I hope, I gave a talk on this, I think it was entitled Pretending to Know Things, Faith, pretending to know things you don't know. If someone says, I have faith that Jesus will heal me, that's very different from saying, I hope that Jesus will heal me. It's a different, I trust that Jesus will heal me. And I give challenges I posted online. I've yet to have a single person answer my challenge. I give linguistic challenges that use the words faith, hope, and trust. The words are simply not interchangeable. They're just not interchangeable. People use them as interchangeable, but they're not. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, fine sir. You look confused. How about you?
I'm a biblical scholar.
You're a what scholar?
A biblical scholar in Sydney University.
Wonderful.
And
welcome. You've come to the right place.
Thank you. No, actually, I'm an atheist, but a biblical scholar.
Oh, okay.
I came from a Christian background, and I have this passion to approach people and talk to them about biblical issues. I guess my initial approach when approaching evangelists and Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons and those kind of people, I initially was like sharpening my teeth and stretch my muscle of knowledge and approach them aggressively. I learned to discipline myself to approach them more compassionately and sincerely. Like, we both need to find the truth. So actually, I applied some of your talk today without knowing.
Oh, so you did this before you read my book?
I didn't even read your book. I just disciplined myself on some stuff, and you happened to touch on today in your talk.
And how's it worked for you?
Here's my question.
Yeah.
With most people, it works. It's much better when you approach someone kind-heartedly. But a couple of months ago, I approached an evangelist in the street, and she started telling me about... I told her about my experience, she told me about her experience, and as we were talking, she told me how she came to find Jesus Christ. And she was a drug addict, and she was this and that. And apparently, long story short, she lived a miserable life, and Jesus saved her life. I guess my question is, do you ever back off? Now, if you approach someone compassionately and sincerely, and you really want to heal them, you don't want to make their life worse, is there a point where you would tell yourself, back off? This person, yes, on faith, but faith is a drug for them, and they are better off on faith.
Yeah, well, my mom was on her deathbed dying of bladder cancer. I didn't perform an intervention to convince her that she'd been living a lie for X number of years. So sure, there are times when you need to use discerning judgment about when to do that and when not to do it.
I'm just going to put in a little intervention here of my own. And that intervention is that for those that aren't aware, Sydney Atheists are trying to put together, we hope, later this year, to have an escape year for my lost. We hope to have an escape religion day on about the 27th of September this year. And as part of that, we're asking people to submit their stories of religious escape. So those that aren't Sydney Atheists and haven't heard this tale before, if you're interested in submitting your story of religious escape, you can find on the web, you can find my email on the web, or you can email me. I'm Steve Martin, not the Hollywood one, the Australian one. and you can send your stories to me. If English isn't your first language and you have issues with that, please don't be concerned. We've got people that can help you write that story. So if you've got a story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. We would like to get about 50 stories from various religions that we can, and possibly write a book. If you are concerned that you don't want your name to be on public exhibit, you can just tell us, and you can be Tom Jones or Peter Boghossian or Steve Nathan?
Am I on? Yeah, good. Hey.
Yo. Okay. Yeah, I apologise for being a question hog, but your insights are so alluring.
I'm overrated.
Okay, this question is it's of a thread of a similar vine that others are sort of asking about, and it occurred to me when you were saying that the crux of the approach is to go into the epistemology or the underlying beliefs of why religion or the faith system or the belief system is actually serving that person in life, and to start a discussion on that level and to show how revising that epistemology would ultimately serve that person, if I understood that correctly. I encounter this a lot, basically within my own family.
So what's the question?
The question is to somebody who has cashed their check, has submitted their ticket for the afterlife, right? They just view the notion of this heaven with so much, this heaven with everything that they desired granted to them. No pain, no suffering, and a hell where all the people that have angered them or all the injustice that's afflicted them will be sorted. It just seems so ingrained, and it sometimes I ask the question, well, if I'm going to replace that delusion, which better delusion do I have to replace that with?
I don't think the way to replace a fairy tale is with another fairy tale. I think that's one of the things I think the secular movement is partially lacking, and that is that many, and I think the atheists and other organizations, humanist organizations, fill that void to an extent. I didn't bring it here today, but I carry around a little clip. I've done away with a wallet, which is like one of the best things I've ever done. And I take, this is just, it has nothing to do with your question, but I take pictures of all of my cards, and it's an accident, and I just, boom, it's on my phone, and I just give it to the woman. I take pictures of my shop. Everything is, I just take pictures of everything. It's all on my phone. But I mention that because the only cards that I do have are when I perform interventions on people. I have a little card, and the card has 4 or 5 names. I have a buddy who's a humanist minister. I have friends, the Greater Humanist Support Line. I have friends in the secular community. And I think that religion serves an extremely important role in that, the role of community. But you can get the same role of community in the same sense of being enfranchised from other things. I do jiu-jitsu, which is like combat wrestling. And when I do that, there's a community that's there. So in other words, it's people with whom you have bonds of trust, and you go out and you do things. And I think often when people abandon their faith, they're not just abandoning their epistemology the way they know their world. They're paying a social consequence of that too. And I think it's really important that we help them develop new communal ties and new bonds, etc. But the only way you can do that is if you actually have something that you can hand to, you can physically hand to somebody.
Can I just add to that question with your experience with your late mother? On her deathbed, sure, but before that, years before, were there moments that you saw a point of no return, that it's just not, it's just...
It wasn't really until I learned that my mom had bladder cancer that either she became religious. She never really talked about it with me. She was always a very, very irreverent person, but she had a little, I wrote about this in the book, she had a statue that we had of the baby Jesus when I was a kid, and she asked my dad to bring it to her every day, which he dutifully brought it to her. So I can't answer your question because I didn't know that she was religious until she had a serious health issue.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Sure.
Hi. How can we use your insights and techniques to reduce the cost to society of letting climate change run rampant?
That is an awesome question. And a couple things. audiences outside the U.S. are always so civil and nice. I always like going outside the U.S. I have no insane people tonight who want to hate me or kill me or spit at me or throw tomatoes at me or burn pictures of me or have big cutouts of me in which they kick my groin repeatedly. So I only mention that because I think that way of thinking is vital. And so sometimes people say, well, why should we do this? How do I know? I mean, maybe you shouldn't do it at all. But do something with yourself, right? I mean, ameliorate human suffering. Find a homeless kid or, climate. Do something that alleviates human suffering, that helps the human condition. So I am not going to be doing this, hopefully, for much longer. Maybe a year. I got a year. I mean, I was actually thinking about transitioning beyond the type of work that I'm doing now. But a few of the things that I was in Australia because I have an app coming out and I have a game coming out and both were delayed. But the only reason I mention that is because we have some extraordinarily serious problems. And one of the problems is global climate change. Last year, this is one of my passions. Last year, China dumped 5 billion pounds of plastic into the ocean. We have a potentially species-threatening event, and people really don't seem to care. I don't know how. I know how these techniques can be used to talk people out of superstition. I know what they can't do. They can't change people's alignment, for example, for what sporting teams they like. And they can't do that because there's no truth of the matter. This only works if there's a truth of the matter. But there is a truth of the matter when it comes to climate change denial. There is a truth of the matter when it comes to anthropogenic global warming. The next thing that I would like to do to myself is to use some of these techniques and some of the things I've been thinking about to try to change or make a shift in what people value. Because I told Steve before, I am completely convinced this whole thing is about values. And there's just no question about it. And it's that people value the wrong things. And the root value, here are the root values. Willingness to revise a belief. Trustfulness of reason. These are not mine. These are from the American Philosophical Association's core constructs on critical thinking. Valuing the role of evidence in belief formation. If we can change some values that people hold, we don't have to worry about it. These problems will take care of themselves because we'll be able to have rational discussions about public policy. Now, democracy is messy, and we'll have disagreements about, should we invite I know this is a big issue in Australia. What percentage of immigrants should we invite? Or what about asylum seekers? Or what about coal? Or we can have those conversations. But we can't have those conversations if we have people, in the United States, 6 of the 9 presidential candidates do not accept the facts of evolution. Did you see how I worded that? It's not, the words we use are very important. I didn't say do not believe in evolution, because that makes it as if there's some parity between evolution and silliness. That's not the case. There's a very good chance that one of these guys, and I say guys because as far as I know they're all men at this time, are going to become president of the United States. There is far more evidence for global climate change. For evolution. Read Jerry Coyne's book about evolution. Than there is for anthropogenic global warming, and the evidence for that is overwhelming. So if they can't even accept that, then what hope do we have of a potential species-threatening event? So, sorry about that. One of my passions. I apologize. Long answer. The bottom line is, at some point, that is my next area of business. That is what we all need to focus on.
Great. Look forward to it.
Thanks.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
I'm a special ed teacher, and I mainly work with kids who've been in jail and who are probably going to be drug addicts in a few years' time. And I was wondering if you can talk about your work with prisoners and
sure.
What's was one of your aims was to make them become better citizens?
I just need to know. So, how do you use the term special ed? Cognitive challenges or what?
Yeah, basically kids with behavioral difficulties, from behavioral difficulties to mental to problems with their heads, basically.
Yeah, so I did my dissertation on that, and part of the work I did in the dissertation is and I'll talk a little bit about this if you come to the next talk on Islamism and doubt. So part of what I did with prison inmates is I pulled questions from the history of Western intellectual thought, mostly the Platonic dialogues, and I did an intervention today I talked about interventions in epistemology. I did interventions in moral epistemology, that is, the way people come to moral knowledge. And so the difficulty, I told you one way where this will not work, and this will not work if nobody says anything back to you. There is no intervention. If I'm speaking Spanish and my buddy over here is speaking Armenian, we have no common language, there's no intervention. There's no interventions, there's nothing to hook on to. But these techniques also will not work with people who suffer from severe cognitive disabilities. So,
Kids basically who have been in jail, but they're basically normal.
Oh, okay. So special needs here means something.
It ranges. It's a range. Special needs is a range. It can be behavioral problems, psychological problems, to mental problems.
Oh, okay. So in the United States, special needs means something very, very different. So that's why I asked to clarify to begin with. So what I did in those was I tried to help. It comes back to values. I tried to help people value those things and nurture those dispositions that would lead them to desist from criminal behavior. But you can do that all you want. It doesn't make any difference unless you have the two golden metrics for recidivism, in which, meaning people who get out will come back. And those are jobs and housing. If people don't have jobs and housing, it doesn't make any difference what their moral epistemology is. Aristotle says you can't even talk about being moral unless you have food, clothing, and shelter. So unless there is an infrastructure outside of the prison system for when these folks are released, it doesn't make any difference with the interventions. It's not going to work. Same thing with jihadis.
Can I just point you to, if you look at Radio National that was on this morning, Peter had an interview with Carlton, James Carlton, thank you, James Carlton, and Peter covers that with James Carlton, and he does it absolutely beautifully.
I'll give him a podcast. Thanks.
Hi.
I'm Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
Oh wait, I didn't meet you beforehand. Anyway, so a little bit of what I was going to ask you about some of the previous people asked about, but
okay.
I'm up here anyway.
Yeah.
So I related a little bit at the beginning of your talk when you were introducing your intervention techniques, and you said it was very similar to what your wife teaches in addiction medicine.
Right.
And I study medicine.
From that.
Yeah. So, and it did remind me a lot throughout the talk of what I've learned in my medical course about counseling, for example, a patient who smokes a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess I see a little bit of a difference between, for example, counseling a patient who smokes a lot and has a clear benefit to them to stop smoking.
Right.
And this might be a little controversial, but I guess I just wanted to know from you, the title of your talk is How to Create Atheists, and I was, or something like that.
No, it was street epistemology.
Oh, street epistemology.
Yeah.
Something about, anyway. I was wondering
why... Oh, the title of my book.
Oh, the book is about how to create atheists.
Yeah, a manual for creating atheists.
Yes, manual for creating atheists.
Right.
So I was wondering why you feel the need to create atheists.
That's a good... I've never heard that question before. No, it's a good question. So I think that if people have certain values, atheism will be a conclusion that they come to. If they value rationality, if they value belief revision, if they value truth, if they're honest with themselves, Bertrand Russell said, if they don't barter a wish to believe for a will to find out. In other words, sometimes people want to believe so hard. So look, if you're really trying hard to believe something, it's probably not true. Right? So I think that creating atheists is a consequence of those things. And as I said to someone before, I think I said to you back there, the older I get, I don't really told my buddy this, who's a Christian, who said to me, if you ever say this at an atheist conference, you'll never be invited back again. Well, okay. The older I get, here's the conclusion I've come to. I don't really think it makes that much of a difference how people think the universe came into being. In other words, it's called cosmological metaphysics. I don't really think it makes that much of a difference if people think God did it. What I do think makes a difference is if people are kind and compassionate. The problem is, many people who think that the universe was somehow created tend to not be kind and compassionate, or at least their ideas of the people to whom they should extend that umbrella of compassion have been limited. I don't think atheists have a monopoly on kindness. I don't think Christians have a monopoly on kindness. I do think that way of treating other people really matters. And you're more likely to secure that if your beliefs align with reality and if you're honest with yourself. And I think that's part of the problem of holding unevidenced or under-evidenced beliefs, that it can cause you to cascade down this whole... Look, every time a belief is exposed as under-justified or unjustified, you have to mount an irrational defense of the belief to keep it in place. And often what we see happen is we see, both from atheists and non-atheists, we see people treating each other very unjustly. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter. It's possibly related. I just needed a point of clarification from you. Are people allowed, in your paradigm, to hold to a belief without proof?
Okay, so that is an excellent question. The word proof is very slippery. I would not use, as our solicitor friend over here, I would not use the word proof, as the epistemic burden of the word proof is very heavy. But if that is the word that you meant to use, I would say, of course, because I'm sure I have beliefs, not that are under evidence, that I do not have proof for. In fact, if you really want to use the word proof, if that's the standard, I couldn't prove a freaking thing to you. I don't have the slightest idea when I flick the light switch why the light goes on. I couldn't possibly. I don't know how the airplane gets here. I couldn't prove anything to you. So if proof is the word you want to use, the answer is absolutely unequivocally yes. Anybody can hold any belief absent proof.
So sorry, you're saying people can hold beliefs without proof?
Yeah, but the word proof...
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely trying to understand where you're coming from, because someone could say they believe in life on other planets where there's no proof whatsoever, and it's not provable. Is that what you would consider to be something where this is the belief that you can't have because you have no proof for it?
Okay, so that is actually a good use of... And I don't mean to think I'm picking on you because of the word proof, but what I initially thought that you meant was, is it acceptable to have a belief that's under evidence? That's an interesting... I mean, we can have that conversation. Now, if somebody says to you, I believe that there's life on other planets, and you say, well, what is your evidence for that? They say, well, the Drake equation. The Drake equation is basically this idea that, the number of, it's like this n is the number of stars, and the number of planets.
That's not proof, though.
No, it's a reason. No, but it is not proof. I think that belief that there's... When you say life, I take it you mean intelligent space family.
Sentient.
Yes, I think that is an unjustified belief. Okay. Now, I want to clarify something else. Did you also, you guys, I'm really not playing semantic games, but these words are key. Did you say the right?
From what I understood from your whole talk this evening, you seem to have a problem with people who hold beliefs without evidence.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
But anybody has the right to hold any belief they want.
Including the Christians.
Well, including racists.
It depends how dangerous
But you can't. Okay, you can't legislate against crazy beliefs. Like you can't say, well, tomorrow we're going to make a law no hating Aborigines. So it's not a question of a right to hold a belief. It's a question of when you extend the confidence of a belief beyond the warrant of evidence, what's the problem with that? Is that problematic? And it's absolutely problematic. So we need to do the best that we can to be humble about what it is that we claim to know, so that the confidence that we have in our beliefs does not extend beyond that warrant of evidence. Now, proof is a whole new level.
So it sounds like you're differentiating between proof and evidence.
Yes. Like in mathematics, you use mathematical proofs. Yeah.
Okay. You had a diagram before where you believe that faith is a virus.
Yes.
A nice little diagram with all the brains and stuff like that.
Thanks. My slide designer did that.
Okay. What's your evidence for that?
Oh, that comes from Brody, a guy, Darrell Ray. Wasn't Darrell Ray in Australia? Yeah, Darrell Ray wrote a book about that, the God virus. Dawkins has written about that.
Yeah, the whole meme thing. But, you've described it as a virus. What exactly is the evidence and the proof of that? I know you've mentioned a whole lot of names, and I can go back and look at that.
Well, I mentioned those in case that you wanted to reference those yourself.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. So it operates...
It just sounds like a belief rather than...
No, that's a totally reasonable statement. So it operates in the same way, and I gave you the example of epidemiologically. In the book, in chapter 8 of the book, I think it's chapter 8, I write about how faith spreads. And so we think of viruses as being properties of biological organisms that have developed because they conferred some evolutionary advantage. But I also mentioned the word mimetics. There are also evolutionary or ideas or memes that propagate themselves, and they have vectors, and they have almost identical ways of manifesting as viruses. Now, is it technically a virus? Like, could you take the word... I was going to say, no, it's not technically a virus, but the more I think about it, the more it actually is technically a virus. Could you take the word virus as a biological category and apply it to a virus of ideas? I think you can. I think I have. I think I didn't pluck that out of the air. I think that there's a corpus of literature that uses the term virus, and I think that it fits the model. Now, you can say, well, virus might not be the best word because it's used for biological entities with, physical cell structures. So why don't you call it virus B? Okay, virus B. That's fine too. But the replication method is almost identical.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I didn't mean to pick on you about all those words there,
No, we need to clarify definitions.
Yeah, that's right. So I just want to say this very, very quickly. One of the things that I've learned from doing this for so long now is that it's really important when you have a discussion with somebody that you're on the same page. You don't have to agree with them on anything. But if you're talking about, look, I could define faith as a ham sandwich. And as long as the person with whom I'm speaking accepts that and says, yeah, faith is a ham sandwich, well, then we can have a conversation about it. But if somebody has the definition of God or faith or whatever that is not my definition, we can't really have a conversation because we're not having a conversation about the same thing.
It also depends on how you come to the definition.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Plenty have had issues with you over your definition of faith, but we don't need to go into that now.
Yeah. That's all. Sorry, and I'm going to let go. This last time. That's why I put those quotations from William Lane Craig in there, right? Because people say, well, this is just how you're an atheist. Actually, that's not true. This is how Christians use the word, and here's William Lane Craig, chief apologist. Okay, all right. Hi, where are we? I think you're the last one, sir.
Looks like it, doesn't it? Well, look, I speak down in the Sydney Domain, which is a lot of speaking over many years. I've always advocated atheism and rationalism, which I found that not many people are very rational. But anyway, the setup is, and the question I wish to ask is, in this particular case, I set up a scenario where I asked people after the discussion is getting going in the crowds there, whether somebody believes in the literal interpretation of the Bible. And 9 times out of 10, somebody will say, yes, I do, I believe in it exactly the same as it is in the Bible. And the next question I ask is, okay, in that case, do you believe that the light in the moon comes from the sun? Or from, where does it come from? And 9 times out, 100% of the time, I always say, oh, the light on the moon is coming from the sun. And I said, okay, in the Bible it doesn't say that. So the question is, does that question, and obviously the contradiction that come out of it, is that more to make that person who believes in the literal interpretation, but says he does, puts him in a position that it's obviously you can't get out of it?
Yeah.
Does that put him in a difficult position? Or, as I would suspect, it's actually for the benefit of the audience that is actually listening and can see the contradiction and the absurdity of the belief. Okay?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it depends on your audience. Many Christian apologists have said that when they debate somebody, their goal is not to change the mind of their opponent. Their goal is to change the mind of the people in the audience. I don't know. I mean, you could do the sun and the moon thing. My personal preference is the koala bear. Yeah, I mean, you could. Oh, that's right. We're extra koala bears. Where are the koala bears? Where are these koala bears? Oh, they're not bears. Every time I say that, people freak out. They're not bears. They're marsupials. But so the question is, how did the koala bear get to Australia? I read about this in my book. This is like a great one-liner. What do you mean, how did the koala bear get to Australia? I mean, well, how did the koala bear get to Australia? Koala bears, those little fuzzy little marsupials or whatever they are. Bears. Let's call them bears. I'm American. Don't I have like American license to call them bears? They're little bears. They're a little fuzzy and they're in the zoo and stuff. Well, the way they got to Australia is that they if there was Noah's Ark, they couldn't have gotten here because the only thing they do is they eat eucalyptus trees, and there are no eucalyptus trees. So they have to do the one thing they don't want to do. And the conversation book, the guy almost said it, evolve. But they can't say they evolve because they have a strict interpretation of the Bible. So you could use the light, the day, and that's good because that's a little, I thought where you're going to go with that. I was going to say, well, is it okay if it's evidence? That's like a teeny bit of evidence. So I guess that's okay. Koala bear, eucalyptus leaves, Australia, that's working too. So if you find that works, and if you find that works for the audience, and if you find that works because you're helping someone to be more reflective and less dogmatic about their beliefs, then I think that's fantastic. Now, if they say to you, you should also be prepared to say, well, you tell me about the light and the sun. Or you tell. So in other words, I personally would only use something if I knew enough about it so that if someone asked me a question about it, I could give an articulate response. Thanks.
Thank you.
So a few words. I'd like to thank everybody most sincerely for coming. I hope that this is helpful. I hope that you can use these talks. Thank you so much for coming, and Steve for hosting me and the Sydney Atheists. I hope to see you at the next talk at Islamism in Doubt, and I'm just delighted to be in Sydney. Thank you.
Just before I say my last words, I'd really like to thank the committee, the Sydney Atheists, for doing this, for helping us tonight. They are just the most awesome committee. There's Thomas, Semi, Mohammed, Fatty, no, Fatty's not here. Jenny, Jess, I'll lift everybody up. They're just awesome. Thank you very much for helping, guys. And Mike with the red shirt.
I think we're going to have a beer after this.
So Peter, I'm just going to get people to be very wary of Peter. Peter is pre-diabetic, but he does. But he does like to drink. Now we do have a doctor in the house, and that doctor can look after Peter. She'll monitor his behaviour. But what Peter will do is if you'd like to have some drinks with Peter, because the rest of us are going to be tidying up here. If you'd like to have drinks with Peter, it'll be at the Windsor Hotel. And if you go to the second floor of the Windsor Hotel, Peter will lead the way. He doesn't know where he's going yet. You might have to guide him to the second floor of the Windsor Hotel, and he'll be there till about 10:15, 10:30, after which I have to take him to home and bed because his body clock's totally out of kilter. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute delight having you here. I hope you've enjoyed Peter's talk as much as I have. He's an awesome speaker, and we look forward to seeing him again next month. But Peter, thank you very, very much on behalf of us all for a great presentation.